I have mopped the same corridor every morning for 3 years, 4 months, and, by my last count, 11 days. I know exactly how many steps it takes to reach the far end of the east wing from the service lift. 47. I know which flagstone near the third column has a hairline crack that catches mop water and breeds a faint mineral stain if you leave it standing. I know the smell of the palace at 4 in the morning. Cool crystal and very old stone, and something faintly electrical from the overhead light. Filaments. And I know it at 7, when the courtiers begin to drift through in their layered silks and their careful footsteps. I know how to become part of the corridor so thoroughly that those footsteps don't slow, don't look, don't notice me at all. That is the whole of what I wanted. To be unnoticed, to be left alone. My name is Eldrin Voss. I am 68 years old. Before I took this job, a combat field, medic and structural engineer in the Serenthis campaign. 2 decades of patching men together in bad light and fixing pressure systems with whatever I had in my kit, which was usually not enough. When the campaign ended, I had enough decorations to fill a shadow box and enough bad memories to fill the rest of the room. I sold the shadow box at a market stall for 20 credits and bought a mop and a bucket instead. Nobody at the Palace Employment Office asked why a man my age wanted the night shift sanitation post in the East Wing. They looked at my hands, calloused, scarred at the knuckles, and they looked at my face, and they handed me a gray uniform and a starting time. I thanked them and showed up on schedule. 3 years is a long time to watch the same walls. Long enough to know them better than the palace engineers do, I'd wager. That is what I was thinking on the morning this happened. A quiet Tuesday. 2 weeks past the winter solstice. Nothing scheduled in the East Wing until a ministerial briefing at noon. I was working the long wall pole near the 17th column, the one that always runs a half-degree warmer than the panels on either side. I had noticed that on my second week. I noticed it again last autumn. I noticed it again that morning, and this time I stopped and pressed my palm flat to the panel and held it there and counted. Warm, steadily warm, not hot, not alarming, but wrong. I set down the mop. I carry a worn multi-tool on my belt. Old habit, never broke it. And I used the flat end to work the panel's lower edge free. The housing came off easily. Too easily, in fact. The mounting screws were corroded halfway through, which meant moisture, which meant the warmth was not an electrical fault, but a slow pressure leak in the conduit behind the wall. The conduit fed thermal circulation fluid to the East Wing's radiant floor system. A small leak. Running, by my estimate, for 4 to 6 weeks. Dangerous yet. Would be in another 4. I found the source in about 90 seconds. A hairline split at a junction collar. The kind that opens up when the collar isn't seated quite flush at installation. Simple. I carry a length of sealant wrap in my kit because 20 years of field work teaches you to carry sealant wrap everywhere. I cleaned the joint, wrapped it in 3 overlapping passes, pressed it firm and gave it 2 minutes to cure. Then I replaced the panel, picked up my mop, and went back to the flagstone with the mineral stain. That is the whole of the repair. It took perhaps 8 minutes. Heard footsteps at the far end of the corridor, a small group moving with purpose. I recognized the pace before I saw anyone. The Queen does not walk the way her ministers do. They move like they are performing the act of moving. She moves like she is going somewhere. I did not look up. I kept the mop going. 47 steps from the far end to the lift, and she would pass me somewhere around step 30, and I would be part of the wall the way I always was. She slowed at step 28. I was aware of it. You learn to be aware of changes in the air of a corridor without lifting your head. But I did not stop working. Slowing could mean anything. A word exchanged with an aide, a document reviewed. It had nothing to do with me. She stopped. Sanitation worker. The voice is not unkind. It never is in the 3 years I have heard it passing. But it is direct, which is its own kind of startling. I stood up straight and turned. The Queen of the Valesi Reach is pale as good paper, with the faint luminescence at her temples that marks the old Valesi bloodline, and her eyes are the particular gray of winter sky just before it decides what it wants to do. She was looking at my left arm. I looked at my left arm too, to see what she was seeing. My sleeve had ridden up during the repair work, visible on the inside of my forearm. I had forgotten it was visible. The way you forget a scar you have owned for long enough was the service, brand of the Serenthis campaign. A small sigil burned in the field the old way, marking a specific unit designation that no longer exists because the unit was formally dissolved after the campaign's end. I had not thought about it in years. The Queen's aide made a small, involuntary sound. "The 33rd Meridian Engineers," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, Your Majesty." She was quiet for a moment. Behind her, 2 ministers and a secretary stood very still. The way people stand when they are trying to recalibrate something they thought they understood. "My father served in the Serenth's campaign," she said. He spoke of the 33rd. He called them the ones who held the line at Karev Station when the thermal systems failed. I did not say anything. There was nothing useful to say. We held it. 8 of us for 11 hours with field patch tools and whatever we could, cannibalized from the station's maintenance bay. Afterward, there were 4 of us. "He died before the campaign's end," she said. "He never told me, he could not tell me, whether the men who held Karev Station survived." I looked at her, properly, for the first time in 3 years. "Some of us," I said. She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she did something I had not expected. She stepped forward 1 pace, brought her right fist to her chest, and inclined her head. The old field salute, the one that went out of formal use 30 years ago, but that the soldiers of the Serenthis campaign still used among themselves when they happened to find one another in unlikely places. I did not know what to do with that. My hands were holding a mop handle. I shifted it to one hand, my fist to my chest, and inclined my head back. The aide made another sound. One of the ministers said, very quietly, something that might have been a name, might have been my rank once, which I have not heard anyone use in a very long time. The Queen straightened. She looked at the corridor, at the wall panel I had just reclosed, at the faint residue of sealant wrapped dust on my hands. "Did you find behind the panel? Pressure conduit junction collar. Slow thermal leak. I've sealed it. It'll hold." She nodded. Once. The way a person nods when a report confirms what they wanted to hear. "The East Wing has been 2 degrees cold for 6 weeks. Chief Engineer filed a review request last month. He was told the system was functioning within acceptable parameters. He was probably reading the aggregate sensor," I said. "The collar leak wouldn't show at aggregate. You'd need to walk the panels by hand." "Yes," she said, "you would." I picked up my bucket. I was not certain what was expected of me now, so I did what I have always done. I moved to the next section of floor and continued working. She watched me for a moment longer. I heard her speak to her aide. Something quiet. Something I was not meant to hear, except that the aide writes things down and later those things become palace record. And the palace record, later, became a thing people mentioned to me in the service corridor, in a tone they probably meant to be gratulatory. What she said was, "Put his name in the East Wing maintenance log. Full name, old rank, date of service." That is all she did. She did not offer me a title. She did not ask me why I was here. She did not suggest that a man with my service history ought to be doing something grander with his mornings. She just made sure someone would know my name had been in this corridor. I finished the East Wing on schedule. I returned my bucket to the service room. I hung up my gray uniform the way I do every morning, on the same hook I have used for 3 years. On my way out, I passed the 17th column. The panel was smooth and even and correct, the same temperature as the panels on either side. 7 steps to the lift. I counted them, the way I always do.